Hello everybody, Bradley here, and today we are talking about industrial zones. In the past, I've done 2 videos on districts. You guys have loved them, and since then I've had a few requests for more districting videos, but also a few things have changed around here since the last time we put one of those district videos out. The first thing that has changed is I've played the game more. As you play the game more, you get more experience, you form new opinions, things change, I've changed, the game's changed, we've all changed. Everything's changing. All the time, forever. That's how life works. The second thing is we've gone through like most of the whole frontier pass. So the game has changed quite a bit. There's been lots of patches, lots of changes to districts. We've got some new districts added in, all that fun stuff. It's a good time to revisit districts since it's something you guys want to see, something I want to make, and something that's changed quite a bit since we last talked about it. And finally, we got an editor. Hi, Onvars. Having an editor means I don't have to do all the districts in one video. I can do all the districts in their own videos, which is why we're talking about industrial zones today instead of all the districts like the last 2 videos. So thank you to everyone who's subbed on Twitch or a YouTube member or who watches the YouTube videos or just everyone in general for being here and allowing us to have an editor who can help make good content like this. I just want to do a quick disclaimer before we hop in and talk about the industrial zones that all of these videos are based on my own opinion. All of the districts, there's heated debates about them, okay? People will throw down over whether industrial zones are good or they're bad or they're terrible or they're amazing. Same with entertainment complexes, same with commercial hubs versus harbors. So we're going to talk about districts a lot over the next couple weeks. All of these opinions are mine. If your opinion is not the same as my opinion, it's okay. Everyone just play Civ how you like it. If I tell you industrial zones are amazing and you think you think they're terrible, don't build them. If I tell you they're terrible but you think you're amazing, build them in every city. It's a game. We're all having fun here. We are using this save file here as Spain to talk about industrial zones here today. We actually streamed this save on Twitch. You can see we're building nukes. Ooh, what's he gonna do? What kind of victory is he gonna go for? Ooh. So I guess you guys can see the spaceports as well. Doesn't matter. If you want to watch games like this happen on Twitch where I play them and you chat at me and spam emotes and stuff, twitch.tv/VanBradley is the place. Link is in the description. Go and click the follow button. You'll be notified when we stream next. We stream all the time. We stream Civ. We stream Football Manager. We recently hit Twitch Partner. It's been amazing. But go and click that Twitch link to have a fun time. You should also check out the link in the description for our Discord server. It is super cool to join. There's lots of people here, around 300 or so. We have a general chat, some Civ chats. If you want to talk about civilization, that's all good. You can come into our Discord server and join everyone else here in that. We also do some podcasts, have a variety of other things. You can post your video ideas here. We have a whole bunch of things happening. So if you want to join the Discord server, I highly recommend it. That link is in the description as well. And finally, thank you so much to all of our subscribers on YouTube. You are all amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think we just hit 5,400, which is amazing. I appreciate it so much. Also, thank you to all the channel members who are giving that $2 a month to kind of help keep the channel going. We recently bought a Go XLR. We are paying Onvars to edit some of these videos. So all your money is going to support the channel and to help create more content on here. So I'm really, really appreciative and thank you so much for that. If you're interested in being a channel member, there's a join button underneath. There's a link in the description. Also hit that subscribe button. Just do it so you don't miss any more Civ videos. All right, industrial zones, the most debated, the most hated, the most loved, the most everything district in Civilization 6. I've got one right here. Let's talk about it. As we take a look at this sexy industrial zone here, the first thing we need to delve into with our districts is what are they giving us? What is it that industrial zones give us that we wouldn't have if we didn't build this just beautiful orange set of buildings here? This is where industrial zones get very interesting. They're the only district in the game that gives us what they cost to make. So we use production to build them. They give us production back. So part of what we're trying to figure out in this video is that worth it? We have a direct comparison there we don't have with other districts. With campuses, they give you science, but they also cost production to make. They don't cost science to make. That would be weird. I don't even know you'd have to pull stuff out of... Anyways, you get the point. I also want to say that I'm fully aware that last video, I kind of told you guys industrial zones were not really the best and you shouldn't build too many of them. And that's mostly still my advice, although my opinions and thoughts have changed over time. So if this advice sounds different than the other tutorial, that's not a mistake. That's why we redo these videos as our opinions change, as the game comes out, as it gets patched. It's because if you watch that one, my opinion there will be a little bit different than my opinion here. So just know that I'm aware of it. The first thing I want to talk about is the positioning of the industrial zone, because it differs a little bit from the other districts in the game. Obviously, with all your districts, you want to position them where they're going to get their adjacency bonuses. So if we take a look at campuses, they're going to want to be next to mountains, because that's where campuses get their adjacency bonus. But if we look at industrial zones, a lot of what gives them their adjacency bonus are things we have to build. Where's the industrial zone here, right? So we get production from each quarry tile. We have to build a quarry. We have to build 2 districts. We have to build a government plaza. We have to build... Is there anything here that we don't have to build? I actually didn't check this. Mines, lumber mills, aqueducts, baths, canals, dams, strategics. We don't have to build strategics, and we don't have to build ley lines. You do have to take ley lines though, which is mostly trash, so that's fun. Good luck with that. But we have to build most of the adjacency bonuses here, so that's one thing to keep in mind with industrial zones. Aside from the adjacency bonuses though, industrial zones have another big thing that you guys want to consider when you put them down, and this will lead into our analysis about how many of these you should be building on average in your games. Industrial zones and entertainment complexes, we'll talk about those in their own video, but industrial zones have buildings that apply in a radius. So if we go to the factory here, where's the factory? There's the factory. Its production bonus is extended to all city centers within 6 tiles that do not already have a bonus from this building type. So you can't stack this bonus multiple times, but this is something you want to keep in mind when you position your industrial zones. It's going to give its production bonus to all city centers within 6 tiles. So when you build your industrial zones, you want to consider, hey, how many city centers am I hitting? If you're only hitting 1, if you build your industrial zone way over yonder, down by Guangzhou over here, right, you're not going to hit very many cities with that bonus. If you build it where we've built it here, kind of in the middle of a bunch of cities, you're going to hit a few more. 3 is the number I typically use. Now, this is just an average, but I've got to have a number so I can quantify and kind of work through my decisions in game. So my number is typically 3. If my industrial zone is within 6 tiles of 3 cities that aren't the one that built it, right? So poor man's Portugal built this industrial zone, right? It is within 6 tiles of Bottle of Whiskey, Pamplona, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 away from our capital. So this industrial zone, built by poor man's Portugal, can hit 3 cities with its factory production bonus, and I would consider that a good amount. So now we've learned that the positioning of industrial zones is important. You want good adjacency bonuses. You want that factory boost to be hitting as many cities as possible. If your factory is giving production to other cities as well, then they also don't need to build industrial zones a lot of the time. But there are reasons to build industrial zones that don't have perfect positioning. As you can see up here in Partner Party, thanks everyone who follows the Twitch, and in Pertov, I built 2 industrial zones that don't have good factory radius bonuses, right? These 2 industrial zones or factories can't hit each other, so that's not ideal, right? And then they can also hit, this one hits nobody, and this one hits 1 city. So that factory boost we just talked about doesn't really exist here, but there are dams, there are aqueducts. These are good industrial zones if we're looking at just pure adjacency. +6 and +6. So I value the adjacency here, but the reason I don't value the positioning around other cities quite as much is because of what they give us, the great engineer points. In a space race game, I'm very focused on great engineer points, and the only way to really get them is to build more industrial zones. So there's only a few specific instances where I'm this focused on engineer points that I will build bad industrial zones to get them, but they are mostly the only way. So if you're in a game like we are right now with a science game, and we really want those end game great engineers that are going to send us to space, there are good reasons to build your industrial zones kind of not central to everything else, even though that is usually important. And those great engineer points can be a factor, especially in Heroes and Legends mode, because if you're using Hercules to build your industrial zones, they don't actually cost production anymore, so it's a pretty low risk way to get great engineer points. A lot of people typically only really want great engineer points for the wonder building engineers, and that makes a lot of sense. There's not a lot of great engineers out there, not as many as some of the great. There's a lot more good great scientists than there are great engineers. Most people want the wonder building ones, and they want the space race ones. In this case, we wanted the space race run, so that's why we have so many industrial zones. if all you're looking for is just the wonder production great engineers, what you can do is you can just build one really good industrial zone, like the one down here, good adjacency, hits a bunch of cities, all as well. And then if what you want is just like the next great engineer, if you come here and you say, hey, like I want Alvar Alto for whatever reason, right? You can come in here and you can actually run projects that'll give you great engineer points. It's called industrial zone logistics. Industrial zone logistics can only be built in the city that you built the industrial zone, but they will give you kind of temporary great engineer points that you can use to get that great engineer that's kind of next on the ballot without actually having to build more and more industrial zones. So keep that in mind when at the end we talk about how many of these you should be building. If all you're looking for is the wonder great engineers, you don't need to build a million industrial zones. You can just run projects in the one, maybe two good ones that you have. Another reason to make sure your industrial zones are nice and central to a bunch of cities so you don't have to build too many of them is that power also works the same way. So the factory is going to give its production bonus to cities within 6 tiles, but the power plants are going to give its power to cities within 6 tiles, right? So a coal power plant automatically converts any amount of coal into power for cities within 6 tiles that need it each turn. So what that means is all cities within 6 tiles, right, will get power from a coal power plant here if there's enough coal to burn. So if I want to power this city, our capital, but I don't want to build an industrial zone, I can power it with the industrial zone here as long as it's not more than 6 tiles away. So it follows the same kind of logic. It's just good to know that that's another reason to position it in the middle of a bunch of cities. If you are planning to use it for power, then it needs to be able to hit as many cities as possible. If I was planning to use this industrial zone for power, that would be very inefficient because it's not going to be able to power very many cities. Additionally, these cities that it's powering aren't even really good when I built this industrial zone, right? This one powers our capital, which is an amazing city. So the quality of city matters a little bit as well. It's more important for this industrial zone to be central because it's affecting way more good cities than this industrial zone, which would be affecting lower quality cities on the whole. For reference about how important this power mechanic can be, industrialization comes in here. So now, of course, you need coal in your empire to get the power. I'm going to assume you have lots of coal just for the sake of this argument here, right? Your coal power plant comes in here. This is your first chance to power up your empire, and that happens at industrialization. If your industrial zones are central to a bunch of cities, this is fairly easy to do. If you want to not power with these, right? If you don't want to use these for power, which I make a choice to do in a lot of games, it's a valid choice. But just so you know, if you're newer to Civ, the next chance you have to power things up without these is probably going to be technically hydroelectric dams, which come at electricity, but those can only go in a very small percentage of cities. A very small percentage of cities. I'm going to just keep it in. A very small percentage of cities. Wow, we got there, chat, viewers. Who knows where you're watching this? We got there. Holy smokes. So you have the hydroelectric dam up here. That's a little bit to get to from industrialization. And then you also have, whoa, way over here, satellites will give you solar farms. And then after that, composites will give you wind farms. So it's a very long time before you can reliably power your empire if your industrial zones aren't centrally located. Now, this is fine. Not everyone needs to power their empire every game. But if you are planning to power up your whole empire, and that's what you're doing, having one central industrial zone makes that a lot easier. Having industrial zones yeeted off to the side of the map makes that harder. Now we finally need to talk about, is it worth it to get industrial zones in terms of just the raw numbers of production? So industrial zones cost 54 production. So let's say you just put an industrial zone down, it costs 54 production. Early on, your industrial zones are pretty bad. So let's assume just you're lucky, you put your first industrial zone next to some strategic resources, and it's a +2 industrial zone. So it costs 54 production, so you need about 26 turns to pay it back. So you've placed your industrial zone, it's a +2. The first one costs 54 production. That's right, 20, that's 20, what, how much is that? How many maths is that? All right. Right, 50 divided by 2 is 20. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So that's 22 turns. In my example, man, I'm a mathematician. Put me back in school, ladies and gentlemen. If you build a +2 industrial zone early on, it'll take about 25 turns to repay itself, which is fine. You know there's going to be more than 25 turns in your game. There's probably going to be 150. So there's loads of time for it to pay itself back. But in that 25 turns, you're not doing other things, right? You also have to keep in mind what turn it's going to end, not what turn you place it down, because sometimes you are building industrial zones in cities that have a low amount of production. So if it's turn 50 and it's going to take 20 turns to build, and then you need to pay it back, that takes longer because you have to factor in that 20 turns that it's being built as well. All that being said, generally my advice with industrial zones is earlier the better. You want to give your industrial zones as much time to pay themselves back as possible. The production is additive. Obviously, the more turns your industrial zone is in play, the more opportunities it has to give you the most amount of production. Now that's the same for all districts, but particularly with industrial zones. Get them down early, make sure you have a plan to make them really high production so they pay for themselves quickly, and you're good to go. Like I mentioned though, if you're building industrial zones, even if they're going to pay themselves back, you might be delaying other things because the other districts also work the same way. Their yields are mostly additive, right? So if you are building an industrial zone in an early city, I mean, we don't get industrial zones till apprenticeship, but most cities when you get industrial zones can only have 2 or 3 districts. So you're building an industrial zone. It's great. It's going to have lots of time to pay itself back. Well, you might be missing out on other yields as well. If you're building an industrial zone, maybe you could have built a commercial hub instead, and over the next 30 turns that this industrial zone is paying itself back or being built, you could have been collecting more gold, or you could have been collecting more science. So even if the industrial zone mathematically pays itself off, you might have a weird tempo. If you're playing on deity, you need to catch up in science to the AI as quickly as possible. Now we have 1900 science in this game, so we're doing great. But if you're spending time early in the game building too many industrial zones, even if they're giving you lots of production, you're losing that per turn science that you're getting that you're not getting from not building campuses. So just keep in mind that even if your industrial zones pay themselves off, building too many of them can lead to a weird tempo thing where even if the industrial zone is fine, you've kind of delayed some of the other things you need early on in the game to catch up to the AI, especially on higher difficulties. Now that we've kind of talked about everything industrial zones can do, right? Where to position them, the yields they give you, paying themselves back, the great engineer points, the power, the 6-tile radius thing. Now that we have all that in mind, it's time to kind of figure out, should you be building these, yes or no? How many should you be building in your average game of Civ? To give you guys an idea of as you're moving up the difficulties, or maybe if you're new, where you should be going with industrial zones, because it is really easy to just build like 100 of them every game, because production just sounds like a really good thing to have. So, like many things in life, it's a little bit complicated. There's no way to quantify all these things together. Some days the production you'll get from them will be great. Some days the great engineer points will be worth more. Some days just having the ability to power up a bunch of good cities with a couple of research labs will be amazing. So your calculus will differ on your own experience, how you like to play the game, but also each game. This is one of those very rare games, they do not happen often, where I built 2, these are fine for adjacency, but 2 kind of out of the way industrial zones purely for great engineer points because I valued them that much. I might not value them that much in the next game when we're going for a culture victory or something, so these calculations are ever changing. All in all, if you were to play 100 games of Civ, random leaders, random everything, you just go for all the victory conditions, right? In your average kind of baseline game of Civ, what I would recommend is I usually recommend you settle around 10 to 12 cities. Within those 10 to 12 cities, I would recommend building 2 really good industrial zones. Now, like I mentioned, this is average. Some days I'd recommend building 0, some days I'd recommend building 6. But I would say on average, if you have 10 to 12 cities, you should be building in most of your games 2 industrial zones that are nice and well-centered to get the most out of them and to get the most out of your games. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me here, and that's totally fine. Some people are going to say you shouldn't build any more than 1, maybe 0 in most games. Some people will say, hey, I love Civ, I play a lot, I win most of my games, I build 4 or 5 every game. Like I mentioned earlier, that's all fine. My overall recommendation is going to be 2, though, and that's for a variety of reasons. Using my example of building an industrial zone, and then the industrial zone hitting 3 cities, right? Now, sometimes you can make it hit 4 cities or 5, and that's all well and good, but just the average of 3 that I recommend, right? What that means is you have 2 cities, 2 out of 10 that have built the 2 out of 10 or 12 that have built the industrial zone. So it's 2 of your cities that you can use as like production powerhouses to build some good districts, to spam out builders, spam out traders, build your units, build your wonders, whatever it is. You have 2 cities that have pretty high production now. You have 6 cities, 3 for each industrial zone, that can get the regional production boost. So they're not getting as much production, but 6 cities is fine. To get a little bit of extra production later on in the game. And that's also 6 additional cities that can be powered from the same radius boost, right? So far, right, you have 10 to 12 cities, you have 2 that have really good production, and 6 additional cities that are going to get an additional production boost and some power. I think in your average game of Civ, that's totally worth it. Adding on top of that, getting 2 industrial zones will also give you great engineer points, and it'll give you enough great engineer points to get most of the wonder great engineers. You'll have to ignore or pass on the rest of them. You're not going to be rolling in points, but it gives you enough where you can pretty comfortably get the great engineers that you're wanting or looking for, especially the wonder ones, which is what most people who want to have fun with Civ will get for their great engineers. So I think these 2 well-placed industrial zones that are going to give you that power, give you that little bit of an extra boost to around 8 cities or so out of 10 or 12 that you should be building in most of your games. And then on top of that, you'll get a couple of the great engineers. And keep in mind, some of these wonder great engineers give you 480 production per charge, right? If you use 2 charges, 960 production, right? 960 production pretty much pays for the industrial zone. So the wonder great engineers do go a long way in kind of paying them back and securing wonders throughout the game. So like I said, not every game's going to be different. Everyone's opinion is going to be different. But if your cities are kind of spread out like this, if you can get 2 kind of well-centered industrial zones that affect around 8 out of your 10 to 12 cities total, and you can get the great engineers along the way, I think that is mostly a fair compromise on industrial zones that should make everyone happy. In this example, this is also assuming you're actually like doing your best to make sure these industrial zones have good adjacency bonuses, right? So what is this industrial zone here? I may have just built this one for the Ruhr Valley. I can't remember. Right, this is a +5, right? This isn't a bad industrial zone. I would say the 2 industrial zones should be at least +4 or 5 when you're finished with aqueducts or however else with more districts, however else you want to get there. I would say the industrial zones in this example probably need to be somewhere around 4 and 5 production once you're done to really make them worth it. I will add a little addendum to my advice though and say in a science victory, that's usually when you want to go kind of farther with the industrial zones, and culture victories are usually when you want to pull back a little bit. The reason why you want to build more industrial zones than your average in science games is having more cities that can build spaceports, launch space race stuff. That's very, very helpful, and you're going to want as many great engineer points as reasonable to get those great engineers that are going to send you to space a little bit quicker. The reason why you want to pull back a little bit is typically appeal based, right? So you can make the argument that if you get industrial zones in a culture game, which is where you want to pull back a little bit, in my opinion, right? You can get the wonder great engineers, you build the wonders, you get the tourism, all that. Industrial zones do a lot to pollute the planet. Not overly helpful in a culture game when making your empire kind of nice and pretty and high tourism is helpful, and polluting the planet and making it kind of gross doesn't go a long way. But also it's mostly appeal based, right? Having high appeal is very helpful in a culture game for a lot of reasons. National parks are one of those reasons. Earth Goddess is another one of those reasons. Just the general appeal of your tiles will allow you to have seaside resorts, all those kinds of things, right? And industrial zones don't give you really good appeal. Having industrial zones typically means you want to build mines and all of those types of things, and those give you lower appeal. So I would recommend, you know, that's not to say don't build any in your culture games and build 8,000 in your science games, but if I'm going to go with my advice average being around 2, then I would say in a science game, 3 or 4 usually works. In a culture game, 0, 1 is usually my average, right? But you know what? The industrial zones are yours too. Go have fun with them. Build as many as you like. All right, well, that was a lot of talking about industrial zones. I hope you enjoyed the video. I also hope you enjoyed this format of doing each district in its own video for kind of our district update instead of bundling them all together. One of the things I'm most excited to see actually is your comments below. Everyone's going to have so many different opinions. I'm going to have missed a million different things, or I'm going to have mentioned just the right point to prove what you want to say. So let me know in the comments what you think about industrial zones and what your advice is to other Civ players. Like I mentioned, I'm only one dude. I play a lot of Civ, but my play style is different than all the other people I watch play DD. Like the Game Mechanic, Boesthius, Potato McWhiskey, Peppermint Butler, myself, we all have different play styles, right? And so we value things differently. So let me know in the comments below what you think about industrial zones. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, just do all the things. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.